For a while now, I've found a lot of enjoyment in classifying species for the characters and enemies from the Donkey Kong franchise, which is something I've been a huge fan of since I was a little kid. Something that I think is a lot of fun about classifying species for these characters is the fact that they're all based on real animals, or most of them are at least, but they sort of have a cartoonish spin on their appearance or their functionality or both. Anyway, a lot of people have asked me to look at the blue Kremlings from the Donkey Kong games, and if you aren't familiar with Donkey Kong or what Kremlings are just the name for the crocodilian species that Donkey Kong fights in the games. And there are a ton of them that are blue. You got Klaptrap, Clampon, Crusha, Cruncha, Crumple, Kludge, Splat, and I wouldn't be surprised if I'm missing one. I'm sure it's very clear to you how important it is to be blue and a crocodilian in this franchise. Frustratingly enough, there really isn't a definitive answer on whether or not crocodilians can be blue in real life. Now, I know what you might be saying, what a dumb sentence. Of course they can't be blue because they're greenish brown, brownish green. Whatever. If there were a blue crocodile, I'm sure I would have heard about it. And you're totally right to say that. You are so right to feel that way. There are stories and pictures all the time of alligators being white due to genetic conditions like albinism or leucism. And this is something that I feel like is pretty common knowledge. A lot of people know about this. So surely, if they could be blue, you would have heard about that too. I mean, people have even heard of times where alligators can be orange due to environmental factors like being covered in bat feces. But you've never heard about them being blue, probably. So again, if they could be blue, you think you would have heard about it. You'd really think so, but apparently not, because when you search up "can crocodilians be blue" on Google, you might find something talking about Cobalt the blue alligator. This is what happened to me. I searched this up and I came across two articles talking about a supposedly blue alligator that was on display at Gatorland in 2004 named Cobalt. And as I researched Cobalt more and more and the existence of blue alligators, it became harder to tell if this documentation was real and just simply lost to time, or if this was all made up and never even existed at all. So let's back up a little to Cobalt the blue alligator and Gatorland. If you search up anything about like blue alligators existing, you'll probably find these two websites immediately. You'll find Gatorland's official historical timeline, and you'll find an article published by the Lakeland Ledger, which is a local journal based in Florida. Now, when you go onto Gatorland's official timeline, it doesn't really say much other than that in 2004, Cobalt went on display, which was the world's first real blue alligator, but there isn't much more information. However, on the Lakeland Ledger's article, it sheds a bit more information about Cobalt. In their article, it says that Cobalt hatched with 3 other blue alligators, but Cobalt was the only one that was able to survive to adulthood because of the genetic condition that caused them to be blue. This genetic condition is known as Leucism. Commonly, this usually just makes alligators appear white, whether it be completely on their whole body or in some certain spots. This is kind of similar to albinism, but where it differs is that albinism causes an alligator to lose all of its melanin and pigmentation completely, whereas leucism can vary a bit more. It can be certain pigmentations, and sometimes it can be in certain spots. Most commonly, this just makes alligators white. Sometimes they'll have some spots with natural coloration, but it has also been documented for them to have pinkish hues and orangish hues. And according to this article by the Lakeland Ledger, this is what caused Cobalt to be blue. You know, it has leucism and it's lacking the just the right pigmentation to make it blue, like how some can be a bit orangish. Now, this article didn't have an author listed, so it was kind of hard to, reach out to someone who wrote this, ask them what they know. But luckily, this article did interview someone, and this person was Tim Williams. At the time, Tim Williams was the Dean of Gator Wrestling at Gatorland. And with this job, I mean, he would just work directly with the alligators. And in this article, it's claiming that he worked directly with Cobalt and had experience with it. And he even shares some thoughts about the blue alligator that he had, specifically about its natural beauty, because, you know, it's a blue alligator. It's probably going to look really cool. Unfortunately, neither of these websites have pictures to show you how cool looking this blue alligator is, but at least I got the name of someone who had worked with Cobalt, and I was hoping maybe I could find a way to reach out to him, which unfortunately I couldn't. It turns out that Tim retired in 2017, so I couldn't like find any connection to him through Gatorland's website, couldn't really find anything on LinkedIn. I found like a couple emails that could have belonged to him, but they're no longer like in service. So that was a dead end. And at this point, for most people, this is probably where they'd stop looking, because again, these two websites, Gatorland Orlando's official timeline and the Lakeland Ledger, were pretty much the only two sources I came across. But I chose to keep looking, and I did a bit more digging, and I was lucky enough to come across this third website that had a ton of information, like an absurd amount, and went super into detail about the science of Cobalt, blue leucistic alligators, and their history. And I felt like I struck gold. There was so much information, but as I kept looking at this website, something really felt off. Apart from there being no pictures or videos or sources listed on this website, the sentences and wording of things were just really weird. And then I took a look at their logo, and yeah, this website is just AI generated. It's all completely fake. And now for most people, this would be the point where they're actually like, okay, I'm completely done. I'm not looking into this anymore. This is probably just a bunch of BS. But I still didn't have a definitive answer on whether or not such a blue alligator could exist. I just knew for a fact that I needed a definitive yes or a definitive no. And thankfully, this website was looking like I could get a definitive no, because it's just, you know, again, a bunch of BS. And so my immediate thought was, okay, I'm gonna go research this website a bit more to find out how fake it is. This website I've been talking about is called the Environmental Literacy Council, and it is just apparently it's a political front. It was founded by this guy named Jeffrey Salmon, and he is known for serving as the executive director of the George C. Marshall Institute between 1991 and 2001, which is a non-profit organization that spreads skepticism and misinformation about climate change. And it receives funding from oil companies such as ExxonMobil. The George C. Marshall Institute also strongly aligned with George H.W. Bush's policies and views on climate change, and Jeffrey Salmon himself was a speechwriter for Dick Cheney. So yeah, pretty much the point of the George C. Marshall Institute is to spread misinformation and lie to people about climate change, and that the website that had all this information about Cobalt was like a subdivision of the George C. Marshall Institute. So this website, the entire point of it is to just lie to you and tell you things that aren't true. So this really made me ask myself, you know, what does this mean about Cobalt and blue leucistic alligators? How much can I believe this when I can only find two websites or articles with like seemingly baseless claims, and then the third website that I find about it is literally just lying to you? How much can I believe that Cobalt existed and that alligators can be blue when it's just surrounded by all this confusion and misinformation? Even though it sounds really cool, it seems very unlikely. And even despite all this, I still felt like I didn't have a definitive no answer. Really what threw me for a loop and didn't make me 100% certain that this was fake was just the explanation that alligators could be blue because of leucism. Because again, it only means that certain pigmentations can be lost. And while normally this makes it so alligators end up being white because they lose all of their pigmentation, they have been documented to have orangish hues before. And so in my mind, I'm thinking maybe hypothetically that could mean that they could be blue. Just because Cobalt seems to be fake doesn't mean that other blue leucistic alligators are completely off the table. I even asked my biology professor about this at the time, who specialized in genetics, and the logic of Leucism possibly making an alligator blue checked out. Like, it's not far-fetched at all. So with this like tiny 1% chance of me not being completely convinced that it was all fake, I kept going, and I decided, last shot, I will go on r/crocodiles and I will ask anyone if they know anything at all about Cobalt or any other blue leucistic alligators. And I shared everything I found at the time, all the confusion, all the misinformation. And I just wanted to know if anyone knew anything, if anyone saw Cobalt, anything at all. And I made this post on r/crocodiles, and it got no attention, pretty much. Maybe it got like a few likes or whatever. No comments. And so it just kind of sat there dead for a while. And then a month later, I got one comment. There was a tiny blurb about so-called blue gators in a local neighborhood publication here last week, but it had no substantial information, and I only found the same links that you did when I did some searching. I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only person who was trying to learn about this weird claim of alligators being blue and seeing how realistic it was. So I immediately reached out to this person to ask more questions, and apparently this local journal wasn't based in Florida, but instead in Savannah, Georgia. The journal is called This Week at the Landings, and its blurb about blue alligators not only claimed the coloration was caused by leucism, but it also came with a picture. And along with this picture was the name of the photographer. After some quick searching, I found the photographer and I immediately reached out to him, pretty much just asking, hey, could I have some questions answered about this picture, blah, 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 blah. And he responded pretty quickly. He offered to not only answer some of my questions, but he also offered to send me the raw image file, which is perfect because if I have the raw image file, then I can, look at it literally when the picture was taken before any editing to see how realistic it was. And I was like, great, let's do it. So I reached back out to him, and I got nothing. I never heard back from him. I reached out to him a few times over the span of 2 to 3 months or something. I don't even remember, but a long time. I never heard back. So I was just left with another dead end, but at least I had a picture. And I don't really blame this guy for not reaching back out to me because he's probably busy and I didn't really offer any incentive for him. No money. So, but anyway, now that I only had this picture, I was left with a ton of questions that I don't think I'll ever get answers to. To what extent was this picture manipulated? When was the picture taken? Where was it taken? What was the weather like? Other stuff. I had it written down, but I never got to ask the questions. So knowing that this journal and photographer are based in Savannah, Georgia, I decided to reach out to all of the nature conservatories and parks in the area to ask if they knew anything about any sightings or reports of blue leucistic alligators. And they were all very helpful. They were able to give me data, sightings from other conservatories and just pretty much everyone in the area. And there was nothing. They had no reports of any blue leucistic alligators, no reports of any leucistic alligators in general. And I even was on the phone with a worker at one conservatory, and they took their time to ask all of their coworkers about it, ask all of their spouses about it if they heard anything, and nothing came up. And they all kind of insisted that they probably would have heard something if this was a thing, which again ties back to the whole thing of Cobalt and just blue alligators existing in general, because you'd think you would hear about it, but no. So yeah, I did record these phone calls, by the way, but I forgot that the state I'm recording in has the two-party consent law or whatever for phone calls, and I forgot to ask permission. So yeah, I can't use the audio, but hey, I can show the video. That's something. Anyway, yeah, I was left at another dead end. I even tried to contact the editor of the journal that, you know, had the picture of the blue leucistic alligator on its cover. Didn't hear back from them. I even called Gatorland to ask if they had any resources about Cobalt. I tried emailing them before, like a few months before. I never heard back, so I was like, okay, I'll try calling them. They put me in contact with the person in charge of the exhibits and displays there. Left him a message. Didn't hear back. So yeah, all I'm left with at this point is this picture, and I don't know how to feel about it. In my own opinion, I kind of just lie in the middle on whether or not I think it's real, which is very frustrating. The reflections in the water make it seem like it could be cloudy outside, since the water's surface is gray and green, which could possibly represent an overcast sky and green trees. But I don't know what the sky looked like. There could be mostly clouds and then like a pocket of blue sky that's reflecting onto the alligator to make it look blue. Kind of maybe unlikely, but I mean, you just can't tell. And then also with the picture, there's like a warm tint. It's kind of strong in contrast, which could indicate that there is sunlight out and some clear skies, but then again, the sun can still peek through when it's overcast and cast a warm tint with gray reflections. So yeah, it's just really hard to tell to what extent the weather is like, how much the picture is manipulated without the raw image file, which I don't have. So I don't know. I'm at like a 50-50 sort of feeling with the picture. I don't believe at all that Cobalt existed at this point. That's like a complete zero. But the explanation for Leucism potentially causing an alligator to have a bluish hue does make sense to me, especially given that it has been documented that they can have pinkish hues and orangish hues, like Crim from Donkey Kong Country 3 and Klinger from Donkey Kong Country 2. But yeah, it's frustrating. It is very frustrating. So yeah, there really isn't any definitive proof, and everything kind of contradicts each other, and there's just so much uncertainty. Like, it's exactly a 50-50 split between believing it's real or fake, and it's just the most frustrating thing ever. And I was really hoping I could have had a definitive answer for you guys, but I don't, and I just kind of had to make the video at some point. So yeah, here it is. It's a bit underwhelming, but that's I guess all the answers we have for now. So given the fact that there's really no definitive proof and it's 50-50, it's really just entirely up to you whether or not you want to believe that blue alligators can exist, to believe that this world is slightly more magical than maybe you thought it was, and maybe just it's up to you to believe that an alligator can be blue and have yellow stripes like Klaptrap.
You keen-eyed viewers might have noticed that I completely went over something. When I was first talking about looking for Tim Williams, I actually completely overlooked the fact that it mentioned that Cobalt supposedly hatched at an alligator farm in Okeechobee County. So I've actually reached out to a farm in Okeechobee County, the only alligator farm I could find on the internet. Granted, I didn't do a ton of research. That's because I just want to get this video over with because I've been working on it for a really long time. Anyway, I have reached out to them. I haven't gotten a ton of information back because the current owner of this farm took over in 2025. The previous owner was his grandma, who is unable to be reached out to right now. So I don't know. We'll see where that goes. If there are any updates, I will post a second video. But for now, I want to be done with this. I want to move on. So that's where we're at. But yeah, I guess that's kind of where this mystery ends off. If you like videos about Donkey Kong and animals from Donkey Kong, I make videos about that stuff, so yeah. You can subscribe if you want or not, it's okay. Okay, bye.